Hi, everybody, and welcome to the BioInnovate webinar. So you're very welcome to join us here today on Tuesday, the 13th of January, 2026. Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Katie Nolan, and I will be hosting this evening's webinar. So like I say, you're all very welcome to have joined us, and I hope that everybody is looking forward to hearing a little bit more about what it is that we have to offer here at BioInnovate. As some of you may know, BioInnovate is supported by the Innovators Initiative, which is a programme co-funded by the Government of Ireland and the EU through the Northern and Western Regional Programme from a funding cycle that spans from 2021 to 2027. So we are very grateful to be supported across the board by all of the funding parties that are outlined at the bottom of this slide, and without whom none of this could be possible. What I'd like to run through today is just a quick agenda. So we'll be talking to a number of the alumni, which will be the most part of our session this afternoon. I'll give a little bit of the BioInnovate background before we jump into that, and that will detail some of the biodesign process and timelines that some of you will be familiar with. Going from the alumni impact piece, we'll talk about why you should apply, what it is that makes it different, what it is that makes it exciting, and we'll be doing an open question and answer session at the end. So you can hold your questions until that stage. If anything is burning and you feel like it's most pertinent to ask it as any of either myself or the speakers that we have lined up here are sharing, then please just put up your hand or pop a question into the chat, and Camille and Martin, who are on in the background, will help to redirect that into the conversation in real time. So BioInnovate, who are we? We are based at the University of Galway in the west of Ireland, and we are a mix between people from clinical backgrounds, industry backgrounds, and academia. So altogether, these cohorts combine to join and form a leading global innovation hub, which helps to educate and inform the next generation of healthcare visionaries and entrepreneurs to positively impact lives everywhere, primarily through the development of healthcare technologies. Going back in time, BioInnovate has been established and in existence since 2011. The purpose of this is to train future innovators and to embed the Medtech industry in Ireland. So Medtech incorporating connected health, HealthTech, traditional medical devices. And it's really a nationwide programme that's based here in the west of Ireland. So we're very fortunate to have had teams coming from far and wide to join the BioInnovate Programme, known as the Innovators Initiative, over the years, and it's grown from being small, I suppose, in its starting roots to being something that people widely talk about and really do recognise. Early on, it was established as I suppose, on the basis of the Stanford biodesign framework. So people may be familiar with that from a medical device innovation perspective. Biodesign was one of the leading frameworks for people to focus on needs-led innovation. So we're the only European affiliate of Stanford Biodesign, which is something that we're really proud of. And that long-lasting connection is something that we've been really fortunate to have been able to cultivate over time and to maintain and nurture. So we're very, very proud of that affiliation with Stanford Biodesign, and it's a real asset to the programme. So why BioInnovate? Why Ireland? Why biodesign? Why did it all come together? In Ireland, some people may be aware that we have over 450 medtech companies, and that really sets the scene as to why there was an advantage towards bringing more medtech innovation and health tech innovation towards Ireland, and in particular the west of Ireland. 17 of the top 20 global medtech companies have a base here. We are the second largest exporter of medtech products in Europe, and that's valued at an approximate of $12.6 billion, or euro, I should say, which is about 10% of Irish exports. That constitutes about 42,000 people employed in the sector, and we are the second largest employer in the EU per capita. And we're number 5 in the world for medical patents per capita. And for a country as small as we are, with about 5 million people or thereabouts, that's pretty much punching above our weight. I think everybody will agree. So that's some of the reasons why it was really important in the background for medtech and health tech innovation to be brought to the fore across the west of Ireland and the wider Irish network in general, which was part of what led to BioInnovate coming into existence. We're based on the University of Galway campus, so we're on the south end of the campus, in amongst the heart of it all. It's a really vibrant setting. There's lots of students around during term time. It's nice and quiet during off season. We're a really vibrant area of the city, and we're very much in close contact with all that Galway has to offer. Most importantly, we have real close proximity to Galway University Hospital, Merlin Park, which is part of that chain of hospital group, and also within throwing distance of many of the large multinationals that I had mentioned previously that are within the Galway ecosystem. Oh, we are a little bit frozen. So here's just a little bit more detail as to exactly where on site that it is that we're located. So you can see there we're right next to the human biology building. There's plenty of access to expertise and different people who are working in the university ecosystem, but also in the wider ecosystem spanning across the university hospital and into the multinationals nearby. Now, bear with me 2 secs. So the team behind BioInnovate. So you'll see across the top here, we have the directors of the program. Mark Brozio is one of the founders of BioInnovate, and Faisal Sharif and himself now constitute the non-executive directors. We then have Professor Martin O'Halloran, who is the executive director and is on this call, and who will be doing some of the questions and answers at the end of this session, and Dr. Sinead Walsh, who is the director of the program. Anne Byrne, Camille O'Malley, and Eve Connolly are the team behind the team. So they are very much the backbone of what happens from an operations perspective in the program office. So we're pleased that Camille is going to be working with Martin here this evening to help to field some of those questions that some of you might have across the end of the session. So BioInnovate is, in essence, a 10-month competitive program for people who are looking to innovate in the world of health tech and medtech. It's a stipend that's supported by Enterprise Ireland under the Innovators Initiative. And there is also another aspect to BioInnovate that may be less known by people outside of industry, which is their industry training. So they do 10 weeks training in innovation for people who are working within those medtech companies or adjacent to medtech companies, and who are interested in the world of medtech innovation on a shorter term basis without going fully immersive into the 10-month program. But this evening, what we'll talk about primarily is the entrepreneurship 10-month program. So at a bird's eye view, you've got 12 participants with multidisciplinary expertise. That spans 4 different categories. So you've got technical, clinical, commercial, and then somebody who might have skills that overlap some of those areas or have other distinct areas of expertise. And that might be software, or it might be somebody with consulting experience, or somebody with maybe a couple of different areas of those overlapping. So each of these participants will register for the postgraduate diploma in bioinnovation, which is the 10-month program. And then they can always decide to convert this into the master's program, which is about 12 months in duration in total. So 3 teams of 4, each of which have one of each of those components that I just mentioned. There is a dedicated clinical area given to each of these teams. And when these clinical areas are being thought about in the ether, they're identified as being areas of specific interest by the director and the program team based on trends that investors or strategics are interested in either funding or acquiring, or that have a huge amount of potential for further innovation based on knowledge of the sector. There are 3 main phases, and you will spend the majority of the year in the identify phase. So you'll be looking to identify unmet clinical needs and then screen these. And we will talk about some of these stages later on in the conversation, but really it's about getting into the clinical setting and observing what it is that clinicians are doing and patients are having as part of their interventions or their patient experience, so that you can understand some of the areas that may be in need of a better way or a different way or an alternative way to do things. And then you'll go towards the later part of the year where you'll be looking towards inventing different areas or different concepts and then implementing these. So you're going through a whole gamut of experience to get you to the point where you're able to robustly say, I now have something that is worthy of going forwards to be a business or otherwise, because there are plenty of other options beyond the scope of the program that are not just limited to starting a startup. So here we have just a graphic of the timeline, and I'm speaking of time, conscious of getting things moving in terms of bringing in our alumni. So just a whistle-stop tour of what the program timeline looks like is a start date in August, then going into clinic time for September into October, spending time as a team screening through the needs list that you've generated between November and December, little break at Christmas, which everybody is very glad of, and then coming back fresh in January to go towards that phase of the program where you're looking towards innovating and inventing ideas. So from there, you're looking towards planning out what the business might look like if you were to pursue this as a startup, and how it would look like from a funding perspective until the end of the program, which is around June or thereabouts. And along the way, you'll have plenty of mentorship and plenty of opportunity to work as a team and learn and understand how best to work as a team. And part of that includes having dedicated leadership development training. So we do have specific coaches who will help you work through that, and we will have specific tasks and activities that will really bring you along that journey through the course of the year or the 10 months. This slide is a little bit more about some of the outputs of the program. There has been 170 fellows trained over the last 15 years. And I suppose by way of introduction to myself, I've been one of those fellows. So I'm a physiotherapist by background. I came into the BioInnovate Fellowship 3 years ago. I had done a program, a master's in public health, specializing in epidemiology, and I was interested to know how else I could impact patient care from a bigger picture perspective. And so after completing the year of BioInnovate, I worked in the program office on their industry training offerings for about a year or thereabouts. And now I work with the ARC for HealthTech, which is also based at the University of Galway. So it's been a really excellent opportunity for me to break into the world of HealthTech. And there are plenty of other clinicians who have done that as well. So what I would like to do is maybe flick through to the point where we talked to Brendan Boland. I'll leave this slide on just for a moment so you can get your heads around what the timelines are in terms of when you would need to apply and when you would be informed and what the recruitment day timeline looks like. But first of all, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Brendan Boland, who is also an alum of the program. So Brendan can give his short little introduction as to his background, his motivation, and where he started when he came into the BioInnovate mix. So thank you very much, Brendan, for joining this evening, and I'll pass the mic over to you from here.
Yeah, not at all, Katie, and it's thanks so much for asking me to be part of the panel. And very simple from my point of view. So I think we have 93 people online at the moment, which is a really good positive indication of how much interest there is. It might sound very simple, very stupid, but if you're online, apply. If you've gotten to the bother of logging on at 4 p.m. GMT on a Tuesday, apply. It's absolutely worth applying for. The application process in itself is thoroughly enjoyable and very informative. So I guess from my point of view, Katie, I was a BioInnovate Fellow 2013 to 2014. So we were cohort number 3. So BioInnovate was still very much in its infancy. Now, we were following very much on the heels of biodesign out of Stanford, which was at that stage, better proven. Over the last number of years, over the last 15 years, some would argue that we've overtaken biodesign in terms of our actual metrics, outcomes, patents, treatments, etc. So I think we've done phenomenally well. And the clinician and scientist in me always says, follow the evidence base. So follow the evidence base on the slide in terms of outcomes of BioInnovate. So it has been exceptionally successful. From my own point of view, my background was medicine. So graduated at a University College Dublin medicine in 2006. And then practiced up until 2013. To be totally honest, Katie, I thought that I was going to do BioInnovate, get the learnings, and then go back into clinical practice and then get a eureka moment somewhere down the line in the future. What BioInnovate taught me was that eureka moments don't really happen. It's actually an awful lot of work to try and figure out an unmet clinical need, invent a solution, and implement it. And the training that BioInnovate gives you within that is phenomenal. So long story short, 2013, finished the program in 2014, did go back to clinical practice, but absolutely got the Medtech bug. Went on to do a commercialization, Enterprise Ireland supported commercialization fund fellowship, 15 to 17, and then spun a company called Loci Orthopaedics out in 2017. Within my role as Loci Orthopaedics, I was CEO up until 2024. Led the funding of around 22 million euros across grant and equity funding, initiating multiple clinical trials, building out the team, filing as far as I am aware, the world's largest patent portfolio in that specific area, and all of the other good stuff and fun that was along the way. So long story short, as in from my point of view, it's a phenomenal program. Anyone online should apply. And like that, as in, I think everybody I've ever spoken to has always had a really positive experience, and it's always benefited people's careers one way or another.
So, Brendan, you're talking about lots of different things there in terms of the gamut of what you will have learned on BioInnovate. And I suppose for the people on the call this evening, we do have an understanding that everybody doesn't know everything, and all of this is a lot of unfamiliar language, especially to those of us with the clinical hat on at the starting point, wondering, can I do this? I don't know anything about equity or raising money,
Yeah.
or, I know a little bit about business, but maybe not medtech business. How did BioInnovate inform your journey towards achieving all of those goals that you've just articulated?
So, and I suppose within the core tenets of biodesign, BioInnovate relies on is identify, invent, and implement. So, if for the clinicians online, that's very much like identifying what's wrong with the patient, coming up with a treatment pathway, and then implementing it. So, a lot of clinicians actually kind of do have that core element built in, which is extremely important. The second element for the clinicians online, it is really interesting because you now go back into clinical setting, but with a totally different hat on, a totally different view of things. And it's fascinating to see clinical scenarios in observation when you're not practicing, when you're back to the fly on the wall. For the non-clinicians online, so engineers or business, BioInnovate gives you an absolutely amazing opportunity for clinical immersion that you would otherwise never get. So as in, if you're working in industry on a interventional radiology device or a cardiac stent, it's phenomenal to actually see that being put in place, all the problems with it, the treatment, the patients, etc., to help identify all of those clinical needs. So for the folks who are online and kind of talking at the very highest level, it's a really, really worthwhile opportunity to try and really impact healthcare positively and move the needle on whole cohorts of patients or whole disease processes. So for clinicians who like to treat patients one-on-one or within a small group, this gives you the opportunity to really positively influence a whole population or a whole condition. So it's really a phenomenal opportunity for the clinicians and non-clinicians.
Thanks, Brendan. That's very comprehensive, and it's great to hear a broad understanding of, I suppose, where you started versus the journey that you went through and where you're at now. I know you're talking there about your experience as a CEO and co-founder of a company and the journey that that encompassed.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you could talk to us a little bit about your current career and where it's brought you in a longer trajectory sense, because I think there will be people who are interested in innovation and interested in medtech, but maybe on the fence as to what their desired output would be. So maybe you could speak to the scope of what the potential outputs are based on your experience.
Indeed, and I guess within the first part, Katie, as in the education of BioInnovate and the pathway to becoming CEO. So like that is in when I started BioInnovate and someone said, oh, do you know what, you're going to go off and raise 20 odd million in venture capital funding. I'll be like, I actually don't really understand most of the words in that sentence, but thank you. But like that is in BioInnovate, the program itself, that's the education, as in that's all part of the program. The second element is within the BioInnovate ecosystem. So as in the people that you get connected with on that journey are absolutely phenomenal. So like that as in, and then on the second part of the question, within kind of a career trajectory. So at the moment I work for EY, so I work for Ernst & Young as a consultant within the Medtech practice. So like that as in within my own career trajectory, I went from dealing with patients one-on-one to try and make people better and positively impact health. Via BioInnovate set up a company to look at a condition that affects over 100 million people worldwide to try and kind of improve that. And now within my role with EY, I work with multiple companies from startups to multinationals to try and optimize their healthcare design, provision, research, development, functioning, operations, etc., to try and improve the overall medtech healthcare ecosystem. So like that, as in BioInnovate really allows you to move up or get off at any floor you want within that career progress or ladder, depending on where you want to optimize and have the biggest impact on patient care.
Great. Thanks a million, Brendan. And you're just speaking there about your, I suppose, experience of the ecosystem. That's probably a point that will resonate with me quite a lot because as a clinician, I was quite intimidated by the thought of going into what's somewhat by feel a different industry. It's adjacent to direct healthcare, but there is a difference between the two. But actually, the support that I received in terms of understanding, who are my new peers, what is the support network that I can lean on, and getting that exposure to all of those different events through the course of the year was really fundamental in making me appreciate that actually there's a lot of people here who want to progress things in a similar way to how I want to progress things for better patient care. And hand in glove, we can achieve a lot more together than we would if we were continuing to go in silo. So I do think there's a lovely opportunity there. Maybe you could speak a little bit about your experience of the ecosystem.
Oh, absolutely. And I suppose one of the things, Kate, is that like that, within the context of the BioInnovate program, as in like there is an executive coach there. So while people kind of say, well, actually, I don't really quite have a business brain, part of the program is to not only benefit from the skill set of your teammates, but also develop the skill set or amend your own skill set over the course of the program. So by the end of it, you mightn't know everything about convertible loan notes, but you have an idea about the financing element or where you want to go, or more importantly, you get an education in what you don't know, where you need to look at building up your skill set or building out a team to take an idea forward or to have an impact in healthcare somewhere else within the ecosystem. Second of all, I think what really makes BioInnovate stand out is the experience of the leadership team. So like that, as in people who've actually done this. So as in, Mark and Faisal and Martin, yourself, people have done it, they've lived it, they've worked in startups, they've built companies, they've closed funding rounds, they've done clinical trials. This is not an academic program. This is a program run by and for people who really want to kind of, become operational, get work done, really change things. That doesn't always have to be within a startup. So says the guy working for EY, it can allow you to really build up a phenomenal skill set that you can apply in many different contexts with a much better understanding of essentially how R&D and innovation work within health tech and medtech, and then how that fits within the wider kind of health tech and patient clinical community. So the ecosystem is phenomenal. It really helps you build out your own skill sets. It helps you link in to bolster anything that you need. And then in terms of that, it's really important that the folks who are running the program have actually done this before themselves. So have lived that experience. And like that, it really makes a difference in terms of learnings and learning outcomes, as I think is demonstrated there from your slide of the true success of the program.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Brendan. And I suppose on that piece around, it's not an academic program, it's a program for doers by doers. And I think that's a nice segue to introduce Paula Newell, who is another alumni of the program. So we'll say thank you very much to Brendan for the time being and scoot over to Paula, who has a very impressive backstory and current story. So I'll let you do your own introduction, Paula, and maybe you can just give us a brief overview of your motivation behind applying for BioInnovate and where it's taken you so far.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie, and thanks for inviting me to be on the panel today. And as Brendan said, like, you're on the call, so you're halfway there, so just believe and press submit. Regarding my background is a bit unusual. The reason why, firstly, I applied for BioInnovate, I was kind of at a crossroads of my career. I'm an occupational therapist by background. I have done 2 masters in pediatrics because I wanted to specialize in pediatrics. And then I was like, oh, will I do management? And I did occupational therapy management, managing a team of 50. So I was in that kind of limbo. Will I go up the management chain in the HSC? I had done some private work. It was nice, but there was something I was like, oh, I love learning. And as Henry Ford would say, anyone who stops learning turns old. Either you're 20 or 80, but anyone who keeps learning stays young. So hopefully that applies to me. But so, okay, I was like hesitant applying to the BioInnovate because, it's clinical, commercial, R&D. And clinical, I was thought, okay, maybe you had to do medicine. And I spoke to some people who were on it and they're like, no, you have a mixed background. Why don't you apply? So I applied. And lucky I was one of the 2016, 2017 fellows. And as Brendan said, I didn't know what R&D was, quality, QMS systems, fundraising, loan notes, you know, and there was some people on the program and they knew all about this. So this was all new learning to me. But I could see what I could bring. Like I had some clinical background, I had some commercial background from applying for grants in the HSC, and I also kind of had some engineering background from typical doing up a old house, also in seating, postural management. There would have been engineer principles. And I think as allied health professionals like you, Katie and Brendan, we're used to working in teams, but the teams we work in are mainly clinical. So we think, you know, we don't have experience to R&D or commercial. So that was unique about the BioInnovate program. And also as an OT, like they say, our ethos is we put the I can back into a person's life by problem solving. Like we work with the client, either an adult or a child, and we problem based and goal setting. It's a bit like public patient engagement. You know, we make the goals personalized to the person or the family, and we work at them getting the things. But when you're working in the health profession, you might see loads of problems, but you don't have the time to do it because you're stuck with wait lists, case loads, meetings, and you're like, oh, I'll get back to that. Even to read a journal when you're working, you're doing it in your own time. While the BioInnovate allows you 10 minutes to forget about caseloads, just totally immerse yourself in a problem, in a need, and learn from others, as Brendan would said, the leadership team, the alumni, and just see where it brings. Be open, you know. If I go back to my background and how it led me on. So I've over 25 years experience as an occupational therapist. I would have graduated from Trinity College. Then I specialised in paediatrics. I would have worked in the National Rehab Hospital. Then I worked in kind of all different learning disability paediatrics. I would have set up development and coordination disorder service in Galway. Then I would have been involved with early intervention services and then went into management. So then I would have got sponsorships, set up a private practice in Australia in the outback and reach on autism. And that allowed me great, like, oh, you know, allowed me to see what's out there within the kind of allied health and health profession in Ireland. So I came back and that's when I said, oh, I'll try management. And then that's when the BioInnovate came in. I was like, okay, I'll be open, see what it brings. It's 10 months. I was lucky I got seconded from my HSC job, you know, and saying, well, if you let me on this, I can bring back stuff to the health, you know, to the health, you know, about innovation, health, wait list, quality, risk assessment, all that is involved in health. So I was lucky, I got seconded. I was involved in the endocrinology team. And I kind of knew basically what endocrinology was, the study of hormones. But, you know, from diabetes to women's health to thyroid. But I learned so much more because you're involved 10 months in that clinical immersion. And then I came up with a need of a hormone-free treatment to treat genital urine symptom for women, which is GSM. Basically, symptom we're looking at is vaginal atrophy. And that, like, normally when we're working in adult health, we're working with a caseload maybe of 30 or 40. But coming up with a solution, I'm like, I'm addressing 50% of the population are women, and 50% of women are going to suffer with vaginal atrophy. So on a wide scale, it's so much, I can target so many more of the population than in my allied health. So I was fortunate. I got a commercialisation fund from Enterprise Ireland in 2018 of 500,000 to identify, is this a real need, market analysis, to do some preclinical studies, and also to liaise with the validation with the clients, you know, will women and clinicians buy it? So I did that, and then I was fortunate in 2021 to get EIC, a European grant of 2.5 million to expand the team and to do clinical studies. So I recruited a team and we did clinical studies in Georgia, and the women who were on our clinical trial got symptom relief and they wanted to continue using the device, which is the Vita AV. So we're fundraising a 10 million Series A to do a US clinical trial. In 2024, similar to Brendan, I stepped down from being CEO. I just wanted to focus on other stuff, become a mom, and go back to occupational therapy on a part-time basis. So now I'm director of Avita Medical, the company, and I also, from being on the BioInnovate Programme, I review grants for Enterprise Ireland, EIC, provide mentorship for Spark Ignite that's involved in HSE, liaise with health innovation, stuff and items that I couldn't have done before without being on the BioInnovate Fellowship. And also then I bought back quality stuff that I knew nothing about for risk assessments in the health environment and quality systems that I would have learned. And I was fortunate to get grants approved now for develop pediatric services in the HSC because I've learned how to, grant write from that. So that's just that remit of how I have ended up from 2016 to 2026 and how it has led to so many different pathways with the support and leadership of the team, the network, and the alumni.
Brilliant. And you've hit on a lot of themes there that are analogous to some of those that Brendan hit on as well there, Paula, from coming from a clinical background, using a structured framework through BioInnovate and biodesign to understand what the unmet needs were in a clinical area that may not have been familiar to you prior to starting, which I think is an important point to note, is that you don't necessarily have to have any prior knowledge or experience of clinical practice or specialist domain knowledge. A lot of that is embedded into the program where you will get designated time with clinical champions who will help to upskill you on some of the core fundamental principles of a given clinical area. And then it's up to you to help your team to progress along, if you're the clinical lead in the team, to understand that area and identify unmet clinical needs. And I think you used the phrase there, Paula, of I came up with a need. And I think that's a really important point, because a lot of this is about understanding how best to craft the information that you're being presented with into a need statement and those fundamental skills that allow you then to appraise the need, and whether, like we were talking about before, when you go through the process, it constitutes a viable business to progress with. And it sounds as though that kind of immersive experience really stood to you, Paula, in both starting your own journey in startup land, but also going back into the HSE as a clinician. So it sounds like you've had a really interesting journey along the way. And I'd be keen to hear a little bit more maybe later on about some of those learnings that have maybe expanded your thinking or given you more of a 360-degree view. But what we might do is go over to Conor Connolly, who is one of our other alum. Well, actually, he's a current fellow at the moment. And Conor, by contrast, comes from a commercial background. So Conor is the commercial lead on his team. And I'll let Conor take it away from here to give us a bit of an overview as to what he's gotten from the program so far, in particular about the day-to-day, day in the life, and some of the coaching and executive training that's available to him as part of this journey. So thank you, Paula. We'll move over to Conor.
Thanks, Katie, and good afternoon to everybody. So maybe a quick comment to begin, just to touch on what Brendan and Paula both opened about coming this far and applying. So I actually joined the webinar last year and I listened to that exact message and I applied. And I got called in for the interview day. And even after the interview day, I thought, wow, that was worthwhile. I actually felt like I genuinely learned a lot about myself, having gone through that interview process. So just to kind of second that piece about putting the application in and going through the process being worthwhile. My own background, you mentioned it there, it's commercial primarily. So I actually worked with two startups. I joined a startup directly at university. I studied biotechnology. So I have a Bachelor of Science degree and studied biotechnology, and I joined a startup which was supposed to be for 3 months, and I got sucked into the enjoyment, the madness, the chaos of the startup world, and ended up spending about 12 years there. So I was the 10th employee, went through everything from 510k submissions to selling the product in Ireland, UK, to eventually selling the product in about 130 countries worldwide. So a lot of experience in the startup world, but particularly from a commercial background, so sales, business development, and marketing. And that was really what drove me to join BioInnovate. Was I've wanted to start my own company for a number of years. I caught the bug when I joined the startup based down in Tipperary that I work for, And so that's why I pursued BioInnovate, was to get into that network of entrepreneurs and to take the experience that I had learned working directly with entrepreneurs in Indigenous Irish companies and to challenge myself and to see could I do it. So I got selected, and then we started last August. I think the first thing you mentioned there as well, and Brendan touched on it, was from July, we actually started engaging with some of the executive coaches. So we were already on the learning process. We were getting articles, and we completed a 360 feedback. And many of you will be familiar with that. I had actually never done one myself. So immediately I was learning more about my own skills, potentially where some weaknesses were, and bringing that into an environment where you're now working with a cross-functional team, people with different mindsets, and executive coaches to bring you through. So immediately stepping in August, there was learning, it was interesting, and we were on the move. I think the other thing for me that was unexpected was the level of mentorship throughout the process. So leadership, executive coaching, one piece, but we're now in the phase of ideation, and I can talk a little bit about what we're actually up to at the moment in a couple of minutes. But we go into the Dragon's Den every Monday in Monday Mentoring. We pitch to entrepreneurs. We've met with VCs, finance experts, regulatory experts, and we have direct mentorship on all of those different areas. So the amount of learning is just incredible. It's fascinating. It's quick pace of learning as well, which makes it very energizing. And then the other piece as well, which was just genuinely interesting, was the clinical immersion. So I'm on the orthopedics and sports medicine team this year. We spent 2 months going into Galway University Hospital and the Mater Hospital, meeting with consultants, looking for problems and trying to find those unmet clinical needs for 2 months. So again, very enjoyable to go through that process. I think the last piece that I mentioned that's been a huge benefit for me, and then I'll get on to what we're up to at the moment, has been the network. So you see some of the alumni here, the support network. Katie, you'll preach this as well. Everybody is so welcoming, helpful, and people genuinely want to support others that have gone through the journey. That's been eye-opening to me. It's been amazing to network around Galway and Ireland. And Ireland is a small place, and I'm yet to meet one person who hasn't been helpful that's involved with this network as well. So I think most of the alumni would actually say something similar. But yeah, for maybe just to kind of come back to then what we're up to at the moment, we ended up with about 300 needs from the clinical immersion. We've been working through the biodesign process to filter those needs over the last couple of weeks. We're due to get to our top 5-ish over the next few weeks. So it's been pretty interesting. Again, a change of pace. I think somebody mentioned that by the time you get comfortable with a phase in the process, you get uncomfortable. So you keep moving forward, you keep progressing, and it keeps things at quite a pace. So yeah, we're deep into the needs filtering in the ideation phase at the moment. Pitching those back to the mentors, as I mentioned, getting quality feedback there, and we will see what happens over the next couple of months now.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Conor. And I'm smiling from ear to ear as you're talking about what stage you're in at the moment, because you talk about starting out with a big number of needs and then whittling those down and being at the point where it's coming to the top 5. And it's all very exciting in real time. Yes, you feel the pressure to get everything done, but at the same time, you're there to work as part of a team. And a lot of that is facilitated by both the backroom teams, so the likes of Sinead, Mark, Martin, Fezel, Camille, and the rest of the mentorship panels who come in on a weekly basis to really do that Dragon's Den feedback session. And that sounds like it's a really vicious experience. I can assure you it's not. And you definitely hear, the things that you wouldn't have thought of had you just been left on your own to think about what it is that you're addressing, because all you have in that instance is your own train of thought. But what you get through this experience is a 360 immersive view of other people's lived experience and what their perspective might be that will inform your decision making going forwards without necessarily taking that responsibility of decision making from you. Conor, I was laughing as well. You just mentioned about the interview day. I remember coming away completely energized. And as it turned out, a friend and I had gone to the interview day together, or the assessment day, or the recruitment day. And we were both buzzing in the car on the way home, and we were both nervous in case we didn't get it, or in case one of us got it and the other didn't. And we both ended up on the program together. And I have to say, the friendships that you make on the program as part of a group of 12 people are really second to none. They're very supportive. There's always a cohort who've gone before you. There will be a cohort who'll come behind you. And it's a really great way to expand your own network in a very direct sense, as well as reaching out to those who've gone, down the longer term journey a few years ahead of you. So I think you articulated all that really nicely, Conor. What I will do is just move over to Yanka, who is one of last year's fellows. So thank you very much, Conor. We'll go over to the viewpoint of an engineer or somebody who fits into that engineering lead category as one of the team of 4. And Yanka, maybe you can start by giving us your background, your experience of the program, and where you're at to date.
Yeah, hi guys. Well, it's a great cohort here, as everybody said. Really nice to hear everything again and all the experiences. I think, and I keep saying that to everyone who chats with me about it, BioInnovate is a type of addiction. After you've gone through that, it's really hard to get out, it's really hard to stop seeing this word, even though you decide another career path. So, and the guys were mocking me here because the last class basically officially finished out only back in June. So I still don't feel like an alumna, but yeah, there we are. So yeah, basically I'm a materials engineer by background. So I'm Brazilian. I did my bachelor's back in Brazil. Then we decided to move to Ireland back in 2020. And it's supposed to be just a kind of exchange experience, just a year maybe and go back. And there I am 6 years after. So things started to develop here. And I think since my bachelor's, even though I did the engineering part of it, I always have my feeling strongly for the clinical areas. I thought strongly about medicine. It wasn't exactly what I wanted. So I tried to keep the engineering close enough to the clinical setting. And even back in the bachelor's, like I did all my projects, my research projects in biomaterials and what we could do using like nanomaterials, delivering drugs, and that was already like mind-changing for me. Because when we think about engineering, everybody's kind of thinks in a closed box, and the medical device world just opened a new brilliant world to myself. So when I came to Ireland and we decided to stay, I did my master's. I'm based in Limerick. So I did my master's in the University of Limerick in biomedical device materials, just to get a kind of deeper knowledge into this. And then I started to work in the industry here. I basically started in Ireland over the contract manufacturing site, which was very interesting to see a kind of broader scope of medical devices. So I was working as project management. So I have a certification from PMI, as a certified associate project manager as well, and was working like between the technical and the management side and doing all these projects for these big companies like Boston Scientific and Medtronic. And you see those fancy devices which would exactly do what we are looking in BioInnovate, like come for an unmet clinical need. And I was like, oh my God, I want more than manage that. I want to be part of something like this. How can I do that? So initially my mind was literally like, okay, maybe I need to do another post-grad in R&D, get closer to the clinical side again. And then BioInnovate came up. And it's funny enough because the company that I was working with, a new manager started over there. And when I was kind of stalking him on LinkedIn, he was an alumni. And I was like, what is BioInnovate, looking through his profile? So I, of course, waited a few months to get a deeper interaction. And I was like, oh, I saw that you did BioInnovate. Like, could you just talk me through that? And then he gave me like all of these things that you're hearing here. And my eyes were just shining like, oh my God, I need to be part of it. And then I decided to apply. And even though like I was in Ireland for, let's say, 4 years, so my experience in Ireland wasn't like quite huge, even though I have worked in Brazil and a multinational. I was like, well, why not? Let's go and let's see. And then it comes to the recruiting process, which was everything that the guy said here. I felt extremely happy just for coming for the interview day. Even though like after I left that day, I was like, even though if I don't come in, that was totally worth it. So I'm just reinforcing what Conor said and Brendan said. Just apply it. Just apply it now. Don't leave it, because the interview day, the recruiting day, is as intense as the program. You will see and learn and understand so many things about yourself and understand so many things that you still don't know, but you would like to keep kind of doing it or researching about it. So I remember leaving Galway, like just ecstasiated, like I was driving back home, just feeling amazing. And yeah, so basically I got in and my clinical area was interventional oncology. So I just saw a lot of questions here in the Q&A about the clinical areas, and Sinead kind of explained to the guys as well how it works. There is a trend, between the investors. But as Martin said as well, I think you have to have an open mind when you come to the program, since you're not exactly choosing the area. Like I wasn't at all close to the clinical. So coming to oncology, into the hospital facilities, having opportunity to see like open heart surgeries, that is mind blowing. So everything is kind of worth in a different way. And I think the engineering skills in itself is, of course, if you find an unmet clinical need and you decide to go for like a commercialization fund or open a startup, the skills in engineering are pretty straightforward. I was laughing at what Paula said about like, I had no idea what it was like QMS and R&D, and I had no idea what it was like ventures, and like how to fundraise and Series A. So everything is kind of taught to you in the program. You're going to have the base of everything, but then you're going to understand like, what else do I need to learn if I really want to develop my career here? So
And
yeah,
maybe
that's
I'll
pretty much it.
hop in there, Yanka, and just maybe ask you to speak about some of the structured networking that happens through the year. And I'm talking about the exposure to conferences and different networking events. What was your experience of, I suppose, being immersed in that new environment where you were able to learn about things like ventures? And how did you go about maximizing that opportunity for yourself?
Absolutely. I think we're going to have different profiles, and it's really important to understand that. You're going to notice a bit that, like, I'm a kind of extrovert person, I'm a talkative person. So I know it's easier for myself sometimes to push myself out there, to say, hi, what's up? Can we exchange contacts here? But we had loads of people in my own group and in between the 12 that it didn't. But this is a skill that you need to develop if you want to move forward in this pathway. And you're going to understand that everybody in this world are people, like human blood and flesh, just like yourselves. So it's kind of it's a little bit scary in the beginning, It's like, oh my God, those fancy full of money people, what am I gonna say? But things starts to flow because we start to learn the background. You start to like be interested in what they have to say as well. So I remember like there is two major conferences that we go, and as fellows, you still don't have an unmet need, you don't have any startup, so you are there more as a kind of observer, and everybody knows BioInnovate. Like you have to keep that in mind. By you being a BioInnovate fellow is like a famous thing, so they're gonna be, oh, are you a fellow for this year? Really nice to meet you. What is your clinical area? So they don't come to you talking about the money in itself and how much you need or whatever. They want to understand what you're working on, and they give you insights and kind of criticize ideas as well, in a nice way. So it's just, guys, seriously, it's unbelievable the amount of exposure and the amount of things and the amount of people you're gonna meet. So
And to be fair, Yanka, I think you've really done a great job of capitalizing on that and creating a really strong network, especially given that, you had only said that you were in Ireland since 2020. So I think it's very impressive how much you've built out your own network on the back of the exposure and opportunity that BioInnovate afforded you. One other thing that I'll just touch on, and then we'll move over to the questions and answers, is around your experience of living in Limerick, but the program being based in Galway. And maybe that's just, I suppose, a loose point that there is some degree of flexibility while it is very much team based and people are encouraged to be in person. Yanka, maybe you could speak about your experience of doing a little bit of commuting as part of your journey through the program.
sure. I think something that people have to have in mind is that the program is intense in a nice way. And I would say in the first 4 months between August to September, you have to be in there. But we're not talking about in a mandatory way that people are watching over you. You have to want to be there because you're going to go through, you're going to meet, you're going to have to be in places, with so many different people that it's really hard to do it online. Like not impossible, of course, and there is the flexibility, but you want to be there, especially in the clinical immersion. Like there's no way to observe anything clinically from your house. So what I did myself was I rented a room and like just a kind of point in the middle. The BioInnovate starts in August. I was getting married in November back in Brazil. So my life was really kind of upside down and everybody went through my wedding with me, which was really nice. But I was between Limerick and Galway, basically staying in Galway for the week. I rented a room, and guys, you're just going to sleep there, really. Like 9 a.m., you're back in the office, you're going to be in the hospital until 7 p.m., at least until December. Then you go through your filtering phase, which is really important to be part of the group as well. Everybody mentioned here their own background. So I was saying, like, I had no clue about the business part, and like Paula didn't know too much about the engineering. That's the group for. Everybody's going to complement their skills. So it's really important to be together in this moment. And after that, and I was back in Limerick, like Ireland is quite small enough in a country way. So an hour and a half, an hour something, I was back home. And back in January after Christmas, we have a little bit more flexibility regarding that, because you have your mentoring panels on Monday, which is once per week. So you have a lot of preps to do, like PowerPoint wise and researching your needs. So you can do it a little bit more offline. And then we have to be basically like 3 days per week, I would say. So it's, it's flexible enough, but you have to make the effort as well.
Yeah, and I would say that's the biggest piece, isn't it? Making the effort. I know I was based in Galway, in that I live in Galway, but for the clinical immersion piece, it was advantageous to my team for one of us to be based in Dublin. So I was the person who relocated to Dublin for that period. Other teams had people who might have done 2 days a week in Dublin. Other people were primarily trying to cover ground outside of Dublin and Galway. So they might have been in Cork one day, they might have been going up to the border settings other days. So there is just a degree to which you can be flexible, but it's about the mentality of keeping an open mind as to where you might need to be when, and then helping yourself and working with the program management team to carve that out as best works for both you, your team, and your overall experience of BioInnovate. So with all that, I'll say thank you very much, Janka. I'm going to pass over the speaking stick now towards Camille O'Malley and Martin O'Halloran, who are here on the questions alongside Sinead Walsh. And I know that they're happy to take questions in real time if anybody has any that they'd like to pose. Or maybe Camille and Martin, you might want to just speak to some of the topics that are coming up in the background as thematic areas.
Yeah, thanks very much, Katie, and thanks to all of our speakers for really incredible insights. Lots of questions coming in, and maybe I will throw the first kind of theme to Sinead. So we're just seeing a lot of questions about international applicants, and questions around, whether that's welcome outside of Europe and how that setup works as they apply.
Yeah, thanks, Camille, and thanks to everyone, to Katie and all the speakers. And just in terms of the international applicants, and it really applies to all applicants and everyone on this call, is that really what makes the health tech innovation really spark and work successfully is having diverse viewpoints, diverse perspectives, diverse expertise. And that's really why we bring the multidisciplinary teams together at the start. So we want people from all backgrounds, from all areas, both internationally and from across Ireland. And we welcome all of those different applications. Each year, I would say about 2 out of the 12 candidates would come from international locations to join the program. And sometimes that can be more or less. And also the university has an international office that we can refer candidates to, as well as providing some direct support in terms of questions around visas and so on. And we've a really kind of growing group of alumni now. We have 170 alumni who've come through the program, and we have lots of people who've come through recently and are very supportive and can help people to relocate as well if they're thinking of traveling internationally to come to the program. If I have a moment, Camille, I might just make 1 or 2 really quick points. I suppose to anyone who's maybe still considering before they press that apply button. So Galway is one of the top 5 global medtech hubs. So it is probably the best place in the world to do health technology innovation training. And also the BioInnovate Programme is the only European affiliate of Stanford Biodesign. So it's, you're getting a really high quality training in one of the most exciting medtech hubs in Europe and in the world. It's probably the best time ever to apply. So the program is now fully funded through Enterprise Ireland and the European Commission. So every successful participant will get a scholarship worth 38,000, which is tax-free. and also have their fees covered up to a certain value. I know we've talked a little bit about this, but just to highlight, although the program is full-time and it's over 10 months, there's huge flexibility built into the program now. And I think that's really important for anyone who thinks I might not be able to commit. Yes, it is a big commitment, but we can bring you through, I suppose, the times within the program where it's full-time on site here. And then the other times in the program where there's huge flexibility, such as during the clinical immersion, which might be at any location, and also from the January to June, where you're requested to be on site for about 2 days a week, maybe 3 some weeks. So really, there is that possibility of commuting during those months as well. So loads of flexibility, and really we welcome really diverse range of backgrounds and people to apply. And if you are in any way unsure before pressing apply, we're here as well. If you want to drop us a line, we're happy to have a phone call and chat through anything you want to chat about before you press the apply button. So just a few points I wanted to kind of share with everyone before we wrap up.
That's great. Thanks a million, Sinead. And on that note about flexibility, just to reiterate that there is plenty of scope to carve out the year as works best for you and your team. And like Sinead said, it's about working with the program management team to understand both in advance and in real time what that looks like and how best to leverage all the resources that are available to you so that the year can be as beneficial to you as what you need it to be. So I would encourage everybody to just keep an open mind as to what that might look like and pick up the phone or write an email or reach out to BioInnovate directly if Camille is okay with that, in order to learn a little bit more. Did anybody have any specific questions for any of our panelists? I'm seeing people give lots of questions that are being answered in real time by some of our panelists. So Yanka is just getting back to somebody on the question of being based in Dublin. And really that's just an example of how you can be based outside of Galway for the clinical immersion side of things. And it depends again on what your clinical area is, what your team would benefit from, and how you're able to meet that need yourself, whether it is feasible for you or whether, that's a 1 day a week commitment where you go on the train or something like that. So there is flexibility there, like Sinead said. Martin, is there anything that you wanted to mention as part of this call? Martin O'Halloran is there in the background somewhere.
Yeah, no, just to say that this is an open conversation. So I think we're doing a webinar now for an hour, but if people have questions or concerns or interests, just like email the team. We're happy to take those questions. It's a big step to move away from industry or for academia to do a startup, but happy to take questions and happy to engage. So I would take this webinar as just the start of a conversation.
Thanks, Martin. That's great. And maybe what I just asked Brendan Boland to do as a final parting note is to give us your spiel on the parachute and how BioInnovate can act as something of a buffer for that big scary move of potentially changing direction or taking something of a leap of faith. Brendan.
Absolutely. And I'm terrible for analogies. So sorry, Katie, thanks for that one. I guess from my point of view, it's, again, to echo Martin's point, if you're on the webinar, this is really your indication to yourself to actually apply. And looking at a lot of the questions that have come through, I know the program are very happy to answer all of them. And then even within the application process, it's a great way for applicants to learn themselves as to where their career should go in terms of industry experience or clinical experience, and then actually go, no, now is the right time to do this. From a very, very high level point of view, if you're a clinician who wants the opportunity to really positively impact millions of patients, do it. If you're an engineer who wants to drive your own innovation, to be working on a project to meet a need or a problem that you yourself have identified with your own eyes and everything that goes with that and all the passion, apply. If you're a business person, why wouldn't you want to work on a business that positively impacts healthcare for millions or tens of millions of people? And then if you're from another background, so neither business, engineering or medicine, don't forget, as in some of the most successful teams have actually had someone who has never worked in medtech before, but brings this whole new skill set. So maybe when within each of those 4 groups, if you're kind of saying, do I jump? Do I make the big scary jump? Absolutely. Because BioInnovate is like that within the analogy, Katie. It is that parachute. So as in when you jump, all of the BioInnovate supports are there. So you have the BioInnovate network. As Yanka said, people will start coming up to you to say, hey, are you one of the new BioInnovate folks, as opposed to you chasing them. And each one of the strings on the parachute is actually the ecosystem. So you can lean into people technically, clinically, business, funding, IP, everything. So absolutely, as in, and the program is there to support you. So they're really there in terms of business mentoring and everything like that. So to that end, like, why wouldn't you apply? Why, if you could get on the program, absolutely, because BioInnovate is the most fantastic program, and like that, the best parachute you're ever going to get to make a really positive career change and career opportunity to, as I say, positively impact literally tens of millions of patients' lives.
Brendan, thanks so much. That's brilliant. So without further ado, I would encourage everybody to apply, get the application forms out, try to complete them as soon as you possibly can. Reach out to any of the program management team directly, and they'd be very happy to speak with you. And like that, if anybody has any burning questions, I'd encourage you to just look at the scope of what people have done beyond BioInnovate, and hopefully that will give you some inspiration as to where it might take you down the line. But the first step really is in applying, and I'd encourage everybody to really be proactive in just backing yourself. Understand that the first step is applying, the second step is hopefully being called to the recruitment day, and that in itself is a really positive experience. So everybody who's joined today, I would hope, would be putting forward an application, and if not an application, a query in the meantime. And we'll leave it at that. If anybody has any other final comments from the management team, then please feel free to pipe up. No, all good. Okay, everybody, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much and take care. Bye now.